Water is not wet; it makes things wet. Is that? I've heard that from a couple of people. Is that typically accepted?
Yes, water isn't wet.
I guess because the water, what comprises water is usually a
water
body.
makes
Isn't
it? Water makes things wet. Water is not wet.
Is that true?
It is true,
water
yes.
is typically wet because it's surrounded by other particles of water.
The item that becomes wet.
No, because the water
on
is
it.
not making the other water around it wet.
If someone splashes you with just water and it makes you wet, then it was wet to begin with because it's providing wet onto other things.
We need Fun the Foot as a guest now.
If someone splashes, no, because he'll fucking talk about Brexit or some shit. but if someone splashes you with water, the water makes you wet.
But the water wasn't dry.
Yes, though a water cannot be dry or wet.
But would you agree that as a state, everything is either dry, wet, or somewhere in between?
It has to be either. It's either dry or wet.
So water isn't dry, therefore it's wet?
No, it's neither.
It's neither?
It's neither.
It's not even possible.
Why do I feel like they should be discussing like in a white room somewhere?
I mean, this happens on EFAP all the time. It's when the video's basically lost any connection to all of us. We just floated away in some ridiculous conversation.
So when it rains and people say it's wet outside, they're lying. Because it can only be wet once you go out there.
No, that's not correct.
I'm reading chat's responses.
The things out there get wet.
Yes, everything out there is wet because the water is on them.
And you'll get wet if you step outside.
No, that's unironically. Yeah, that's...
The wetness doesn't exist without the object because the water is just water.
Yeah, exactly. It's wet, dry, or water.
Yeah,
what I would need for conclusion...
Water can't wet itself.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird things that you don't normally think about.
What if there's ice? What if there's a piece of ice and it has water in it?
Ice can make things
No, you take
wet.
the fucking ice and you fucking throw it out.
Perhaps the greatest EFAP in history.
Well, ice and water are different things.
Is fire hot?
Well, they're the same thing. They're just in different states.
Is fire hot or does fire make things hot?
So ice is just hard water. So if
the fact you have to qualify a difference shows that they're different things.
Yeah, sure. But
Yes.
so is
Yeah,
ice that's wet? Fuck.
Wait.
Ice-
Is Rags? Is
ice-
fire hot or does it make things hot?
Fire is hot
Huh?
because heat and wetness don't
It's
measure the same
transferred.
thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. You can measure heat by the speed of the particle in something. Plus fire is plasma.
I want a physics teacher.
Anyway, Jurassic World.
Water is wet.
Wet means covered or saturated with water or another liquid.
But typically water particles will be surrounded by water particles.
Yes, but they're not wet because of the water particles.
But you just said surrounded by water.
What if you mix water with another liquid? Does that other liquid become wetter by the water being on it?
Other liquids besides water can make things wet.
So what?
However, mercury is typically a liquid, but it does not make things wet.
No, we're not bringing. No, we're not.
Yeah,
we're
but
not talking
mercury
about any
doesn't.
chemical.
It like bounces off shit, doesn't it?
No. Somebody find the play button. Where is it?
You've made me interested in this.
No.
Genuinely, because I use it as a logical sort of counter. Water is wet, and if I'm wrong, I'd rather not use it. Like the sky is blue. It's typically used.
I would not say that water is wet. I would say the sky is blue though, because technically color doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Oh no.
That's opening up its own can of worms.
Yeah, you show me right up your ass back up it, please.
But yeah, covered or saturated with water. Surely water counts as being saturated and covered in water, because it is.
No, water's not wet.
Well, too bad. Definitions disagree with you.
What is it that makes the sky blue though? The way light refracts through.
It's our perception of the way that light is refracted.
So it's in our minds and not actually up in the.
Correct.
So
essentially,
it's our opinion.
Essentially, color is a mutually understood phenomenon.
It is subjective.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Rags. Covered or saturated with water. That's the definition. Water is covered in water typically. If you have a glass of water, it's covered in water.
But one particle of water does not change any property of the other piece of water.
It doesn't matter. The definition is covered in water.
Yeah,
Water
each
isn't
one particle
wet
in
because
that
it is
glass
a
of
liquid
water
that
is surrounded by
things.
water.
Once you come into contact with water, you become wet. Until then, water is liquid and you're drunk.
You're drunk. I submit that a particle of water surrounded by other particles of water therefore makes it wet.
Yes, because wetness is the ability of a liquid to adhere to the surface of a solid. So when we say that something is wet, we mean that the liquid is sticking to the surface of the material.
So we agree.
We agree to disagree.
No, I'm on board with this.
I will move on with saying water is wet as a...
Water is not wet.
According to Google definitions, it is.
Google definitions you should not use as a...
You use them all the time!
Sometimes, but not for every
Well, when they agree with you? Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily, no. No, not necessarily. It depends on what it is. Because Google normally gives you colloquial definitions. It depends on how technical you want to get.
Well, okay, what if I go with Oxford?
All right. I would have to... I don't know what the Oxford one would be.
Give me a moment.
Oh, no.
Because what's strange is that if you type in Oxford Dictionary, it autofills the first thing is Oxford Dictionary wet.
Oxford Dictionary, wet, adjective, covered or saturated with water. So I guess Google grabbed it from Oxford.
When it's covered, how much does it have to be covered to be considered covered? Like 70, 80%?
I mean, yeah, a desert could have a droplet of water on it. Doesn't mean the desert's dry or wet.
Single particle.
This is where Rags and Ball's friendship ends.
Dry. It's dry because it doesn't have wetness.
I mean, I'm okay with the desert one because you could just argue from a sense of like.
Yeah, it's free of moisture or liquid. It's not wet or moist.
More than 50% is dry than it's typically dry. Oof, this is getting into like philosophical levels.
It's relative to what it normally would
be. The word saturated would suggest that it'd be more than half, than 50%.
That's true, and covered as well. You wouldn't be covered in water if it was a droplet on a desert, would it?
I am getting really hungry just talking about this.
So wait. So just to clarify, Rags, you agree with the Oxford definition then?
I agree with the. Well, here, let me go back to what it was.
It's okay to agree. Neither of you are going to be wrong. Just go with it.
Why? But I want to say it in future.
I hold to the idea that wetness is a property that is given to things by water or other liquids.
Hashtag
the liquids
team
themselves do not possess that wetness.
This is going to be on Twitter tomorrow as a controversy. You know that.
I was going to say, but Rags, your definition would leave you open to the consistency of when a liquid is halfway becoming a solid. At what point is it allowed to become wet?
Only the parts that are
bullshit. That doesn't make sense.
The liquids would make the solid parts wet.
That's
why you can look at two pieces of ice, and one is mid melt, and the other one is solid completely.
What I'm saying is you've drawn a line that a solid can get wet, but a wet can't get wet. That means there's a point of change.
No. It's not that a wet can get wet. That's kind of It's not that a wet can get wet. Wetness is a property that's applied.
Can a
to
liquid
things.
get wet?
But you need to get into the quantum physics side of that argument and say it is both wet and unwet at the same time in many different dimensions.
You can't.
Someone DDoS YouTube.
No, you can't wet. You can't be wet and unwet at the same time.
Wait, can you wet a liquid?
Now, an object.
How do you know whether something's wet or not until you observe it? And by observing it, are you making it?
No, I don't think that observing something makes it wet. Because something can be wet that's not observed.
But even Jenna wants to play it, please.
Last question: can a liquid be wet? Is it possible?
Can a liquid be wet?
Yes.
No.
No. What do you mean, no?
We'll have to schedule a full EFAP debate for whether water is truly wet. Back to discussing whether or not someone knows whether or not a plot hole is a thing. Wet, consisting of or containing, covered with, or soaked with liquid such as water is wet. Move on.
That doesn't make any. Do you know what I mean?
Someone in chat asked if rhino milk was wet.
By the way, yeah, we brought this up with, I can't remember what EFAP it was, but someone was getting pedantic about some film that we were covering. I was like, you'll never be able to out-pedant the EFAP podcast. We will go to the extreme lengths to discuss anything. Next time we'll discuss whether poop is considered a solid or liquid and at what point it changes, depending on consistency.
Depends on the diet, honestly.
And can poop be wet?
Poop. I can guarantee you that poop can be wet.
God, this poor guy's video. If he watches this video, he's gonna be like, "Why were they talking about water?" And